Hello, Petal. How you doing? For those of you that might have missed it, I was sneaky and snuck it in an extra chapter on Thursday, which was chapter 6. So, today we're on chapter 7 of May Contain Traces of Magic, J.W. Wells & Co., Book 6. See, don't say I don't ever treat you. And thank you for everybody that listened and made comments. I always appreciate it. And if you're new here, please hit the like button if you like it. Hit the notifications bell, share and subscribe. Any likes on the channel really helps it out. So if you do enjoy it, please just give a little bing. That'd be awesome. Awesome. How have you been this week? How are things going? I love your comments and I love our little community, and I know I say it every time and I must get really boring about it, but it just makes me so happy, and I hope it makes you guys happy too. So the question of the day today is, are you going on holiday this year? If so, where to? Are you going far away, or are you going to have a staycation? Are you going in summer or off peak? Let me know in the comments, that'd be awesome. But for now, let's get on with going off to another world, another time and place and space. Chapter 7. Be quiet, Chris's mother used to tell him, and don't make a fuss. And on the whole, he'd done his best, no matter what life had thrown at him. When Danny Quinn had put a dead mouse in Miss Blake's desk, and Chris had been given detention for it. When the assessment board had told him he hadn't got the gift. When Jill had given him the polite but comprehensive brush-off. When demons started popping up practically everywhere he went, he'd kept his face shut and his upper lip rigid and moved on. It was one of the few things he liked about himself. The calm, stoical acceptance. The refusal to break down and make an exhibition of himself. But what the hell? As the air buffeted his face and the slipstream set him spinning, he opened his mouth, filled his lungs and yelled. Didn't do any good. Didn't even make him feel better. Like so many of the things your mother warns you against, when you actually get round to trying it, you realise you haven't really been missing anything much through all those years of noble abstinence. A flaming torch whizzed past his nose, scorching the very tip, but all he had left by way of lamentation was a rather low-key whimper. Hard to get all het up about a trivial burn when you're about to be mashed into pulp on gravity's anvil. A second or so later, he banged his knuckles quite hard on something. Probably a torch bracket, but did he complain about it? Certainly not. He'd stopped. Now that puzzled him for a split second, until the pain in his arm and fingers clarified matters. When his hand had bashed into the torch bracket, he must have instinctively grabbed on it and somehow or other managed to close his hand around it and hang on. He was therefore dangling, one-handed, from the bracket, swaying ever so slightly, with 100 yards or so of tunnel above his head and rather more under his feet. You could call it an improvement if you were so inclined, but as far as Chris was concerned, it was just another imaginative way of experiencing pain before he died. Pretty hopeless by any criteria. No way in hell he'd be able to climb out of there, and how long could he reasonably expect to maintain his grip? 10 seconds? 15 at the very most. Pointless. The sensible thing would be to let go, get it over with. Just relax those fingers and let it happen. No silly fuss. His fingers stayed clamped tight shut. Well, fine, if they insisted on making a fatuous gesture, it really made no odds after all. He sighed and waited for his grip to fail. A handy opportunity, he decided, to have his life flash in front of his eyes while he was waiting. It was the only part of this experience that he felt any real enthusiasm for. The idea had always intrigued him. He'd often wondered which episodes in his life story the great editor would choose to montage for him. the most significant, naturally, but who was he to judge which moments had actually made all the difference? Maybe, too late now of course for it to be any use, the ultimate slideshow would give him the hints he needed to make some sort of sense of a life that had always seemed, while he was living it, to be wildly and unnecessarily obscure. No slideshow, no smiling host with a big red book, no blinding flashes of clarity. Also, he couldn't help noticing, no grip failure. Either he was a hell of a lot stronger than he'd always thought, or something was going on. Screw it, Chris thought, and tentatively flexed his fingers. They came apart quite easily, though they were painful and stiff, as though he'd been carrying a heavy supermarket bag. No contact whatsoever with the torch bracket, but he wasn't falling. Bloody odd, he thought, and looked down at his feet. He was standing, he discovered, on a bird. A hummingbird? He was no ornithologist, one of those tiny, brightly coloured little buggers who can hold still in mid-air by flapping their tiny wings 1,000,000 times a second. All he could see were the blurred wing-tips and the point of its beak, but there was no doubt about it. The little sweetheart was carrying his entire weight on its minuscule little back and apparently thinking nothing of it. Not possible. That went without saying. Magic, then. That actually made him feel a lot better. A real hummingbird couldn't bear his weight for a split second, but who knew what a magic one might be capable of? Only one way to find out. So he waited patiently, watching the bird's wings, and nothing happened. Then he thought, forget about the bird for a moment, pretend you're standing on a ledge or something, and for crying out loud think of some way out of this. Easy to say, he thought back at himself, but this is about as bad a position as it's possible to be in. Really, the chances of me getting out alive are not that bad, Chris thought suddenly. If someone were to stand at the top of the tunnel and let down a long, strong rope, I could tie it round me, and then all they'd have to do would be to pull me up. True, nobody knows I'm here except John, who pushed me down here in the first place. But that's all right. After all, I have my phone. All I have to do is phone. Well, Jill, obviously. She can send helicopters and stormtroopers, strongmen with cranes, wenches with winches, and I'll be out of here like a cork out of a... No signal. For some reason that upset him rather more than the falling stage of the proceedings had done. The hope, he reckoned, so much more painful than the terror or the despair. He started shivering, so much so that he lost his hold on the phone and dropped it. He watched it fall ever such a long way before it vanished into the darkness. For 2 pins, he thought, I'd jump. But he didn't. Instead, he thought, all right, what else have I got? Quick rummage in his pockets. A CD case containing, now that's what I call really bad music 56, a comb, a wallet, a pen, a screwed up piece of tissue paper, a copy of the Book of All Human Knowledge. Well now, Chris thought, what about that? A book guaranteed to tell you what you really needed to know. Tiresome and irritating, yes, and about as user-friendly as a shark, but guaranteed, with the full authority of JWW Retail behind it. Compared with the next best alternative, which was standing on a hummingbird waiting for something to turn up, it did seem curiously attractive. He glanced down to make sure the bird was still fluttering away. Yes, fine. Then opened the book in the approved manner at random. As was often the case, the words were blurry and illegible at first. If the information he needed was in any way abstruse or out of the ordinary, it took a while to search and assimilate. But he was a patient man. He gave the book an encouraging smile and tried not to think about the first signs of pins and needles in his right foot. The print clarified, as he'd known it would. It read, "Downloading updates. Please wait." Ah, he thought. There had been a fair few complaints about that, but as Chris explained whenever a customer raised the issue, one of the book's main advantages over inferior rival publications was the support package. Constant revision meant it was up to date literally to the minute, ensuring complete accuracy and guaranteed user satisfaction. True, from time to time you had to wait around for a bit, but that was a small price to pay for something you could trust absolutely. 10 minutes later, the words dissolved and were replaced by installing updates, installing 1 of 47, estimated time remaining 1 hour 40 minutes. Oh, he thought, well, maybe if I just... Interrupting update installation will result in corrupt data and irreparable damage. On the positive side, there was a little animated picture of a clown doing handstands, presumably to keep Chris from getting lonely while he waited. He watched it for 20 minutes, after which its charm seemed to fade a little, so he spent the remaining 80 minutes swearing at the book's design as he was just getting into his stride when the text flickered again and read, "Updates installed successfully. You will need to restart your application." But all that proved to mean was closing the book and opening it again, which got him. Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, born 2nd of October 1869, Porbandar, India, best known for his policy of non-violent resistance to British colonial rule, leading to independence in... What? Chris thought. No, really, please, another time, sure, but not now. What I need to know is how to get off this bird and back up this vertical shaft without slipping, falling and going splat. So can we please try again? Please? He closed the book, then opened it. Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, born 2nd of October. He'd never ground his teeth before. Read about it, certainly, but never actually done it. Wondered how you went about it, because it seemed such an odd way of expressing frustration and rage. In the event, it came quite naturally. Didn't help much, though. Never mind. He had the key. Fold back the corner of the copyright page and a menu drops down. Press Show Hidden with your thumbnail and you get a list of options, including index. Keep it simple. He touched his nail to falling and waited. Application blocked. Beneath his feet, the hummingbird wobbled. Poor little bugger, he thought. He must be knackered. He pulled the menu back up and tried heights. Great. Then he had a go at down, problems associated with, and gravity, hostile, and even splat. But each time, all he got was application blocked. The bird was definitely starting to slow down. Instead of a blur, its wingtips were becoming visible. Chris tried just opening the book at random on the off chance that it had fixed itself. More fucking Gandhi. He whimpered. The shock was starting to wear off like a local anaesthetic, and panic was slowly creeping in. Magic? Yes, but magic is very real, and it'll kill you given half the chance. And even an enchanted hummingbird couldn't stay flapping its wings forever and ever. A nasty thought occurred to him. Maybe the bird was a JWW retail product, in which case he was very much screwed. When absolutely all else fails definitively, consult help. Back to the index. Apply quivering fingernail. He got, for help, shout, help. Oh, for crying out loud, he thought. Help! He yelled. His voice dopplered away down the tunnel, the sound bending into strange and unnerving contortions. The page flickered and read, "Help not required. Please make another application." "Yes, it fucking well is," he shouted at the book. "I'm going to die, you stupid object. Tell me how to get out of this very, very quickly." Flicker. Incorrect application. See details. What? Oh, yes. All right. Your JWW Retail, the book of all human knowledge, has been precisioneered to supply you with the data you need when you need it in order to provide you with the best possible service. Your JWW Retail, the book of all human knowledge, applies advanced filtering technology to assess and determine your most urgent and pressing need. Where the JWW Retail, the book of all human knowledge, assessment is at variance with your own, rest assured that the product's thaumaturgically trademarked controlled judgment is almost certainly superior to your own. Salesmen are like priests. They can only operate effectively if their faith is unshakable. Once the thin, sharp blade of doubt penetrates the armour of unquestioning belief, it's time to book your place in the handcart, if possible specifying a seat facing away from the handles for a trip to the very, very bad place. Sure, the customers complained about the book. They complained a lot. They said it was a useless piece of shite, only fit for regulating wobbly tables. They were insulting the intelligence of their clientele just by having it in the shop, but they said the same about everything, and they only did it in the hope of screwing Chris for bigger discounts, or out of the primitive tire-kicking instinct that's so deeply rooted in us all. The thought that, just for once, they may have a point came as a very, very nasty blow, and almost made him fall off his hummingbird. "Screw you," he said. "Therefore, I'm about to die. I need help, not a bloody history lesson." Incorrect application. Your JWW, Retail the Book of All Human Knowledge, comes preloaded with Know Thyself 2.0, the latest in character assessment software, and has determined that you are a person of exceptional intelligence and resourcefulness, more than capable of dealing with the physical threat you are currently facing without the need for assistance from your JWW Retail the Book of All Human Knowledge. Should you wish to be advised about the genuinely urgent danger you are presently in, please start a new application. He closed his eyes. Gandhi. Right. Correct. Submitting application. Mahatma Karamchand Gandhi, born 2nd of October 1869, Porbandar, India, best known. Chris slammed the book shut, toyed with the idea of dropping it down the shaft, realised he couldn't be bothered, and stuffed it back in his pocket. Story of my life, he thought. Someone else always knows better. Wanted to do art and drama for GCSE. Got told don't be stupid. What you want to do is business studies and maths. Wanted to be a sorcerer. No, he didn't. He wanted to be a rep. Wanted to marry Jill. Got Karen instead. No point in getting worked up about it at this late stage, really. It was a question of perspective, as in, is there really any merit in getting upset about losing a life as lousy as mine? Oh no. Just a pity that the poor hummingbird should have been put to so much trouble for absolutely mother-fluffing nothing. Unless, of course, the thought hit him like a hammer, he'd be missing something. After all, the book was 100% reliable and accurate. Guaranteed. "Bird," he said. "Tweet." "I'm going to feel such a twat if this works," he thought. "Take me up." Tweet. Chris felt the increase in wing-beat tempo through the soles of his shoes. By now, what with cramp and ankle fatigue, he was having trouble just standing still. As the bird started to rise, he felt himself wobble alarmingly and had to wave his arms about to keep his balance. As the ascent continued, however, he got the hang of it and kept perfectly still. To keep his mind off what was happening, he thought, yes, but why did Honest John push me down an enchanted toilet in the first place? Furthermore, what's going to happen when I get to the top and he realises I'm back? Are we going to have to go through all this again, or should I do something brave and aggressive, like cut his head off with the tape measure? He really didn't like the thought of that, and tried to talk himself into believing that it had all been an accident, or a misunderstanding, an ill-judged practical joke that had gone a little bit further than it should have done. But he wasn't that persuasive. The bastard had definitely pushed him, and although it was true enough that it's a wise man that knows his own toilet, chances were that he'd done it with a great deal of malicious forethought. Chris considered the chances of being able to sneak out of the shop unnoticed and put them at around 4 to 1. The question was, however, did he want to creep away, as though he was the one who'd done something wrong, or was he prepared to stop being the universal victim and do something about it? Well, no, in case honest John thumped him and threw him back down the bog, making a stand, drawing a line in the sand, fighting for your fundamental human rights are all very well if the circumstances are with you, if you've got a gun and the bad guy hasn't, for example, or if you're backed up by a large number of big, ferocious supporters. Otherwise, you're essentially encouraging the culture of violence and oppression by giving the thumper something to thump. It was nearly there. As his eyes came level with the rim of the toilet seat, he whispered, "Stop," and the bird obligingly obeyed. He looked round, as far as his limited field of vision would let him. No honest John. Nothing at all except the toilet roll holder and a partial view of a stack of cardboard boxes in the opposite corner. "Up," he said, and when the moment was right, he stepped off the bird onto the seat, slipped, fell forward, and crashed into the pile of boxes. They weren't hard or sharp-edged or anything, but as they collapsed around Chris, they made a noise like a roll of thunder. He scrabbled about until he found his feet, thinking, "It's a big shop. Well, a tall shop anyway. John's bound to be downstairs, serving a customer. He won't have heard." "Bloody hell," said honest John. "You're back." He was standing in the doorway holding a big mug of coffee, and the look on his face was simply weary, a man having to deal with a tiresome nuisance that he thought he'd got sorted, and then he sighed. "All right," he said, "back you go," and he went to put the mug down. Later, when he was replaying the scene in his mind for the 7th or 8th time, Chris decided it was probably the sigh that did it, though he gave himself some credit for spotting the strategic moment when John's gaze was off him and he was concentrating on putting the mug down without spilling it. Where the technique came from, he had no idea, since the last time he'd been in a fight had been when he was 11 and he'd lost conclusively. He quite liked the hypothesis that there were invincibility charms woven into the polo shirt, but it was probably just beginner's luck. In any event, his kick landed inch perfect with a fair degree of weight behind it. Honest John doubled up without a sound, sort of hung in the air for a moment, then collapsed sideways, like a stack of bean cans when you sideswipe it with your trolley. Chris stared down at him for over 2 seconds, and all he could think of was how very, very upset John was going to be when he recovered from the pain and got up again. It was that, he decided later, rather than righteous fury, that prompted the course of action that followed. He fumbled the tape measure out of his pocket, knelt down, pulled out 14 inches of blade, brought it as close as he dared to the side of John's neck, and tried to think of what to say. It always came so easily in the movies, some Chandlerian wisecrack, but he couldn't help thinking how embarrassing it would be if John suddenly jumped up and smacked him in the mouth while he was still in mid-aphorism. Anger would have been really useful, but he'd mislaid it at some point. He settled for, "Excuse me." John's eyes opened and tried to focus on him. "Sorry," Chris said, before he could stop himself. "Look, do you know what this is?" "Backtalked," John mumbled. "Put the fucking thing away before you do me an injury." "Sorry," Chris repeated, "but no. Not until you told me why you tried to. The difference between men of violence and ordinary people is that the former don't bluff and the latter do. No earthly use threatening to cut someone's head off, even if you're holding an extraordinary powerful magic weapon a quarter inch from their jugular vein, unless you're really prepared to do it. The man of violence always knows you haven't got the determination, which is why he has no trouble in taking the weapon away from you and turning it against you, unless, of course, you're a complete butterfingers." A moment of absolute silence, and then Chris thought, in a deep chamber of his mind where the panic couldn't get through, hang on, shouldn't there be blood? And shouldn't the body be sort of twitching horribly about? Automatic vestigial nerve activity and stuff. The head lay perfectly still where it had fallen, but the lips parted, moved soundlessly for a second or two, then said,
"You clown."
Later he was mildly proud that his first, overwhelming reaction had been relief.
Fucking hell, John.
The words came tumbling out.
I thought I'd killed you. Are you immortal?
The head replied irritably, and then,
I thought you knew that. There's rumours in the trade, John, but I never really... You bastard! You dangerous bloody lunatic!
The eyes rolled.
For all you knew, you could have actually killed me. It was an accident, John. I didn't mean... Bloody hell.
The body shook a little, as though something was making a monumental effort to get it to move, but not quite managing it.
You do realise what you've done, don't you? Fucking pantocopped wounds. You can't rejoin them. You knew that, you arsehole. Which means,
John went on, ignoring him,
that since I'm immortal, I'm going to have to go around for the rest of eternity with my head stuck to my neck with bloody gaffer tape. Oh, too bloody right. Oh, you might want to think about that for a moment. No sudden movements. Think of all the things I won't be able to do for fear of my head coming off and rolling across the floor for ever and ever and ever.
He added with a wealth of feeling.
And don't you dare say superglue, or I'll make you wish you'd never been born. I'm really sorry, John, Chris whimpered. Look, where'd you keep the tape?
He paused. No sudden movements, John had said, and even a 12th Dan martial arts master would have trouble beating someone to a pulp if he could only move really, really slowly in case his head fell off. When your enemy is pathetically helpless, it's not so hard being tough.
I'll get the tape for you, John,
Chris said, voice starting off a little bit wobbly but firming up.
If you'll tell me why you pushed me down the bog. Otherwise, fuck you, I'll get it myself.
The eyes closed, screwed up with effort, and nothing happened.
Why did you push me down the toilet, John? Come on, it's a fair question.
John's next remarks demonstrated a very limited vocabulary, but didn't constitute an acceptable answer, so Chris repeated the question.
Like I'm about to tell you.
Chris shrugged.
No answer, no gaffer tape. Your choice.
The scowl shifted emphasis a little, away from anger towards apprehension.
I can't tell you,
John said.
If I do, they'll
do what, John? Inspiration. Something worse than, I don't know, using a pantocop to dice your stupid head like an onion. Even gaffer tape's got its limits, you know.
You wouldn't do that?
Scornful, but just the tiniest crack of doubt.
I wouldn't want to, Chris said, like I wouldn't want to cut anybody's head off, even if they'd just shoved me down a toilet.
Maybe, just maybe, he was winning.
How did you get back up again anyhow? I thought you didn't have the gift, so...
Maybe you were wrong.
You wouldn't do it.
But this time it was a self-negating statement. Just to press the advantage home, Chris picked up the tape measure from the floor and looked at the head with what he hoped was a sort of mental geometry expression.
I've got friends, you know, John said. They'll come looking for you.
Would they be the ones who told you to flush me down the bog, John? Or were they a different lot of friends?
You don't scare me, you...
I feel really sorry for you, Chris said. I mean, living through all eternity's got to be bad enough, but all eternity in slices.
All right,
John replied, but his tone of voice suggested that they weren't going to be friends anymore. A part of Chris, small but real, mourned for the loss of a really stonking big order.
I'll tell you what I know, and then you can bugger off and never come back. Right?
If that's what you want, John. Honest John sighed.
It was the demons, he said. They told me if I didn't do it, they'd lock me up in a cave in the heart of a mountain. Satisfied?
Chris didn't feel very good about that. An immortal wouldn't starve to death or suffocate when all the air was used up. It'd just get very, very bored, waiting for the rain and the wind to erode the mountain away. I'm sorry, he said, and this time he meant it. All right, can you tell me their names? What they looked like? Another sigh.
Demons don't have names, fuckwit. In fact, they're allergic to them. I thought everybody knew that. And they looked like demons. That's it.
John sounded sincere enough.
You're sure? Yes, like it says over the door,
the head added, and its lips twitched just a little bit.
Honest John.
Well, quite.
All right,
Chris said. I'll fetch the gaffer tape. He stood up, knees stiff after all that crouching, then paused and added,
Where does the tunnel go to? Not a clue. Why don't you go back down there and find out for yourself?
Chris got the tape. It was a tricky job, supporting the head with one hand and applying the tape with the other. It got tangled, and he dropped the head a couple of times, which didn't improve John's temper. The result looked a little bit like a Christmas present wrapped by a 5-year-old.
Now remember,
he said nervously, as he bit through the tape and smoothed down the end. No sudden movements, or presumably reattaching the head completed some circuit or other. John immediately came to life, sat up and made a grab for Chris's ankle. He missed, and the jerking motion was too much for the gaffer tape. John's head came unstuck just above the nape of the neck, toppled forward and fell off. It said on the way down, and then the bump as it landed must have stunned it. Oh well, Chris thought, you do your best for people, and this is how they thank you for it. It was only then, as he went back downstairs to the main area of the shop, that it occurred to him to wonder what had become of Angela. No sign of her in the shop, and she wasn't waiting for him at the car. No surprise there, but where had she gone, and what had she done? More to the point, what had she refrained from doing? He thought about that. He'd nipped off to the toilet and hadn't come back. How long he'd been there he wasn't entirely sure, but at least a couple of hours, thanks to the book. Too much to expect that she'd guessed something was wrong and rushed off to call for help, as witnessed the complete absence of SWAT teams, black helicopters from Jill's demon hunters. The likeliest explanation was that John, having pushed Chris down the loo, had gone back and told her that her colleague had been suddenly called back to the office or some such implausible drivel, which she had naturally believed. At that very moment, she was probably sitting on a train on her way home, thinking harsh thoughts about inconsiderate jerks who swan off and leave other people stranded. Yes, Chris thought, but would she not have thought it odd that he hadn't taken the car? The car. He looked at it and felt a surge of passionate relief. Climb in, lock the door, start the engine and drive away, safe in his small steel sanctuary, where he'd face nothing more lethal than the homicidal antics of his fellow road users. There were times when he believed he was only truly happy in his car, alone, not being hassled by other people, with the seat adjusted just how he liked it, the radio to entertain him, the broad sweep of the open road offering him endless possibilities. True, it was a bit disturbing to listen to himself sounding like a sentimental version of Jeremy Clarkson, but he couldn't help the way he felt. Home is where the clutch is, and that was all there was to it. Before he got in, he peered around inside, looking for demons. Silly, because how would he know if one was there? A bit like going down into the cellar with a torch looking for the future. He sat down, locked the doors, put on his seatbelt and turned the key. She was back. Chris was so used to seeing her there, her black plastic casing fixed to the windscreen with a rubber sucker pad and a clamp, that it took him a moment to realise what he was looking at. But it was her all right. He recognised her screen, her controls, her little bit of black flecks that connected her to the lighter socket. But he scrabbled about in his memory and was absolutely, completely and utterly positive about it. She hadn't been there earlier, when they'd driven up here, when he'd parked the car, before calling on honest John. Not good. Not by any stretch of the imagination. She was supposed to be safely sealed away and under armed guard at Jill's headquarters, not snuggling up to his windscreen. Chris remembered what Jill had told him, about how they fixated on you and stalked you relentlessly until they struck. Had it been she who'd suborned honest John, and was she here to make sure her orders had been carried out, or to do the job properly herself? Buggered if he was going to hang around to find out. He yanked at the door handle, which broke off in his hand, just as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb and joined the stream of traffic. Maybe, because he spent all his working life behind the wheel, Chris was a nervous passenger at the best of times. Being driven by Angela had been bad enough. Being driven by his car was rather more than he felt he deserved for all his many and serious character defects. He grabbed the wheel, but it was like arm wrestling a bodybuilder. The brake was frozen solid. He tried turning off the engine, but all he succeeded in doing was snapping the key off in the lock. Been here before, he thought, as he stabbed in vain at the seatbelt release button. They were quite a long way from the Ettingate retail park. Maybe the demons had another, handier portal. He tried screaming, but needless to say, nobody could hear him. Calm down, he ordered himself. You got out alive last time. Maybe you'll be lucky twice. Somehow, though, he wasn't convinced. Last time it hadn't been SatNav who'd kidnapped him. She'd come bursting in just as the demon was about to murder him, but it was the demon who'd done all the tedious groundwork, and the whole car thing was presumably the demon's MO of choice, not SatNav's. Well, he thought, maybe she's a copycat as well as everything else. Since there was absolutely nothing he could do about anything, it really didn't matter all that much. The car swung out to overtake a school bus. Chris tried waving to attract their attention, his hands demonstrably not on the wheel, but the kids in the bus waved back and made faces at him. He couldn't help wincing as the car zoomed past the speed camera. 17 years without so much as a speeding ticket, and now he'd die with 4 posthumous points on his licence. The indicator stalk dipped and he heard the ticking. That made no sense. He knew this road, and there wasn't a turning for at least 3 miles. Only now there was, and they were leaving the dual carriageway, swirling around a loop, then back across the dual carriageway over a bridge that most definitely hadn't been there when he came this way a few hours ago. He tried to recall the local geography. There couldn't possibly be a road here, he told himself, because there was a town in the way, whereas the car was driving down a narrow lane with high hedges on either side. Nice remote spot, he thought hysterically, where nobody'll hear me scream. Oh, God. And then, hang on, though, still got the pant cocked. Chris didn't fancy any of the available options. Either cut a hole he could jump through, or try and hack through a fuel line, maybe even the front axle. All very well in theory, but a bit too Indiana Jones for someone whose idea of vigorous exercise was getting up to change channels instead of using the remote. Cut a hole in what, for crying out loud? Door? Yes, fine, and then he'd roll out and smash his skull on the tarmac as he landed. Roof? Don't be ridiculous. And it was all very well thinking vaguely about fuel lines, but wouldn't that make the car blow up? Fine if you knew what you were doing, but definitely in the don't try this at home category for the absolute beginner. There was a third option, of course. Wait till we stop and the enemy comes to get you. And, well, he'd defeated honest John, an immortal and quite possibly the Norse god of war by accident. Yes, fine, but if he could cause mayhem like that through mere clumsiness, what could he achieve if he was really trying? Cut his own leg off, probably. The car was slowing down. Also, it was getting distinctly murky outside the window. Impossible, since his watch said it was still only 1:30, but the car turned on its headlamps, twin lightsabers slitting open the darkness, conclusively not in Staffordshire anymore. Oh well, Chris thought, there's always the fourth option. Keep still, yell unsuccessfully for mercy, and at some point, die. It had the advantage of simplicity and relative ease, no prior experience necessary, but it wouldn't come to that. Jill's people would turn up just in time and save him. They'd have been alerted by the snapshot taken by the speed camera. Number plate recognition technology would pass the word down the wire to their central computer. They'd look at the photo, see that he wasn't driving the car as it shot past the camera at 90 miles an hour, and then, of course, they'd realise that something was wrong and scramble the black Hueys. They'd start from his last known location, split up, searching grid patterns using heat-sensitive detectors to track the car's exhaust trail, right up to the point where the car had left the main road and taken a turning that didn't actually exist, down a lane that wasn't really there. So no last-minute escape this time. No fluke sword stroke cutting him free instead of open. No load-bearing hummingbird to carry him away. The incompetence of the forces of darkness in the matter of disposing of their victims might be a staple of fiction, but it wasn't something you could rely on indefinitely. Sooner or later, by the law of averages, even dark lords and evil geniuses must occasionally look out and kill someone. The hummingbird. It was a sad commentary on how Chris's life had been lately that he hadn't given it a thought. Falling to his death, he'd landed on a hummingbird. Well, doesn't everybody? Now he'd stopped to think about it, of course. It was weird, bizarre, and extraordinary. It might also be taken as an indication that somebody up there was looking out for him, somebody who knew where he was, and what kind of danger he'd be likely to find himself up against. Fine, he had absolutely no quarrel with that, but again, the depressing intrusion of weirdness into the normal everyday interplay of hope and despair. What sort of guardian angel, protecting you in your hour of need, sends you a 2-inch bird rather than a helicopter, say, or a winged horse, or a special forces assault team? At the very least, a guardian angel for whom whimsy counted for more than efficiency or getting the job done. Just my luck, Chris thought bitterly. I have to get the comedian. The car stopped. He looked up, and a flicker of light caught his eye. SatNav's screen was glowing its distinctive shade of sky blue. A sudden surge of anger filled him, and before he knew what he was doing, he had hauled the tape measure out of his pocket and pulled out 18 inches of blade. Cuts through anything, the book had said. Did that include malign entities in plastic boxes? Well, if it could slice up Norse gods, he didn't see why not. "You have arrived," said her voice, "at your destination." Why that should have been the last straw, he couldn't have explained. But it was. With a growling noise he couldn't have reproduced in cold blood, he lashed out with the tape measure. Chris felt no resistance as the blade passed through the plastic. Might as well have been waving it in the air, but the casing was suddenly in 2 halves, sagging desolately off the rubber sucker. He froze, wondering what the hell he had just done. Had he killed it? As far as he could see, the box was empty. No wires, batteries, chips, circuit boards, just a vacant shell. No blood either. He looked around, but nothing had changed. He was still in the car, in the dark, on a road where no road should have been. The only difference was he had just committed plasticide. "Hello," he said, his voice shaking. It had never occurred to him that he'd ever actually try and kill anybody, or even anything, no matter what the circumstances. He just wanted to teach the box a lesson, like bashing a recalcitrant photocopier. He wasn't the killing sort. He'd been known to feel searing pangs of guilt about throwing out the rubbish, haunted by the mental image of terrified milk cartons and pizza boxes jumped up in the dust cart's insatiable jaws. And SatNav, well, he knew all about her now. How she'd preyed on him and stalked him all that time when he'd thought they were friends. But that didn't make it right. Turn the radio on. Her voice in his head, a voice he'd know anywhere, a voice that told him what to do, and he did it. Turn right, turn left, follow the course of the road, a voice he'd come to rely on, trust even. Looked at another way, yet another bloody woman ordering him about, but this one had never lied to him, argued with him, made him feel about 2 inches tall, demanded that they talk about their relationship. All she'd ever done, apart from stalking him and abducting him in his own car, was see him right, through the very worst the Midlands Road Network could throw at him. Turn the radio on, please. Ah, he thought, the magic word. Never could resist that. Chris reached forward and hit the button. It was as if someone or something gently deflected his fingertip away from the radio and towards the CD player. He felt the spring-loaded plunger engage, completing the circuit, and the radio's little screen lit up. Now playing, now that's what I call really bad music, 56, Shake It Loose by the Lizard-Headed Women. The intro alone showed that the track richly deserved its place in that particular compilation. You really want to listen to that, he thought, and her voice in his head had replied, yes. Really? He said aloud. You don't like it? Well, it's... He tried to think of something nice to say, like when Karen put her music on back at the flat. He'd got quite good at it over the years, but this time his talent failed him. It's awful, he said. Yes, I think so too. Right, Chris said. In that case, why do you... He broke off. Her last words had been inside his head, but outside it too. He couldn't bring himself to turn his head, but he glanced up at the rear-view mirror. There was someone sitting in the passenger seat beside him. A girl. A beautiful girl, with long dark hair, high cheekbones and pale green eyes. Practically the girl of his dreams. Hello, she said, and smiled. Pleased to meet you. Well, I never. So, which demons are asking Honest John to do things? And will that gaffer tape ever stick? Can you imagine? Bimbling about. I mean, what was so wrong about tucking it under his arm like a rugby ball or an American egg ball, football? My mind goes on strange tangents at times, but it's a good thing, I've been told. Anyway, I digress. So, who is this little criminal? How did she get free? Was it because he opened up the chalice that was the SatNav? Was it a chalice or is it just a prison? I'll call it a prison. We'll call it a jail with a G-A-O-L, just to make it a bit more authentic. Yes. Oh my God. I love this headspace I get into after reading Tom Holt. Do you find that when you walk out of a movie, you walk like a cowboy if it's been a cowboy film, right? Or you go dashing about if it's an action movie, or you float about if it's one of these fantasy movies and stuff. But I find that when you get lost in a book and everything, you suddenly start either talking in the same vein as the author, or you kind of like imagine you're some sort of like king or queen or kind of like fairy demon thing. So, yeah. Discuss. Oh, my lovelies. Right, so I appreciate you very, very thank you for your indulgence. I do appreciate you all very, very much, especially when my brain poddles off in these directions and things. But yes, if you could bing the like button, I would very much appreciate it. By all means, have a little bit of a bibble babble in the comments and let me know how you're getting on and how things are going. And hopefully I'll be back in a couple of days with chapter 8. Hopefully. Cross your fingers and all that jazz. Bloop. Take it easy. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you soon, Petal.